And today on the Terry Dismore Show, it is my pleasure to welcome in husband, father, author, entrepreneur, and really muscle-bound guy. Not really. He's not that strong, but, I am sitting across the room, not close to him because he might punch me.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. Mike Healy. Good morning, Mike.
Thank you, Terry, for having me.
You're welcome. Welcome to our palatial studios here. I know you're probably looking, wow, really, this is a radio studio? Yes, it is. So,
hey, it's awesome. That's awesome. I actually appreciate you having me over here.
Well, it's very good to have you. Tell me a little bit about Mike Healy, who you are, where you came from.
Wow. How far back do you want to go? Pretty far.
Don't start with the stork.
Okay. I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. Was originally out of high school. I wanted to go to the military since I was like a fifth grader. And 3 days before my first senior football game, I'm starting nose guard. I break my femur during practice.
Oh.
They give me they put pins in it, give me a medical discharge. So now I have no future. So all those years.
Yeah.
And then I ended up actually taking some just odd jobs after that because I didn't plan on going to college or anything like that. Didn't know what I was going to do with my future. Moved accidentally from a little hometown, a hillbilly town up north in Ohio, to Columbus, Ohio, and started working at the down on campus, and ended up going out to the bars a lot because it was something that you just naturally did at that age.
You mean they do that?
I know it's hard to believe.
I thought all college was just about reading.
And I made the
study.
grandfather clause to be able to drink at 19, by the way, which is even worse.
Wow.
And because I was a stocky guy, the guys at the bar said, hey, you're here all the time. How would you like to, we'll pay you to check IDs and stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to pay me to come to the bar. Next thing you know, I became a bouncer. I was head of security down at High State campus for quite a few years. And, ran a bunch of the clubs down there. So we won't go into all details and stories there. And then just stayed in the bar industry for nearly 8 years. That's what I did. I, obviously developed all the wrong habits. I know you talk a lot about, God and faith on this show, and I definitely didn't have any root back then with that. And then it was a few years after or probably towards the end of my career, someone, approached me with a couple business ideas, and it got me into a different way of thinking. And really actually started to become an entrepreneur, got involved in church, and that's just kind of the cliff notes of, about a 15-year span of what had happened with my life out of school. And I've been an entrepreneur now for nearly 20 years.
So you were in your late 20s, almost 30, before you get the idea of doing anything with your life other than being at the bar all the time.
Yeah, I was probably 27 years old,
Wow.
26 years old.
So for those of you that are listening this morning that have kids that are, in their 20s, what are they ever going to do? I'm sitting across from a guy this morning that has done very well in his life since then. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Jesus.
Okay. I had a little bit of a background. There was nothing there. There's not a lot of root, but my mom, she was more faith-based than my dad was. And, just my dad had been raised under the religious whip of, do this, do that. And obviously completely rebelled, had no root whatsoever. And what had happened was probably, I think I was baptized in what they would call, getting saved and giving your life to Christ around the age of 11, if I remember that correctly. Mm-hmm. But I didn't frequent church since my dad was not supportive in going to church. Not that, I have a good relationship today with my dad, by the way, and, things have changed, obviously. But back then, when you don't know, you don't know. And my wife, actually, what was funny is my wife, Stacy, we've been married now, I think, 16 years. We actually met in Dallas, Texas at one of the clubs I helped open, and she was from Columbus, Ohio. So we were both from Columbus, and we met in Dallas, Texas. But it was her influence. We had moved back together. We weren't married. We were living together, so we were obviously living in sin, quote unquote. And you just don't know, you don't know.
Right.
And she was the one that kind of suggested we started going to church, and we ended up attending a church that was kind of local to us. And I was attending, but I wasn't participating. There's a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd heard, my wife actually, Stacy, had heard something on the radio one time by a pastor, our pastor actually, Gary Cassee. They were doing a radio show, and just something kind of stood out of the authority of the word and the way he was sharing the message of it. Because, I'm one of those guys that you got to get my attention. I'm not dumb. I'm not going to just go through the normal things. I need to see evidence. And what was nice is we started to see that, and that's kind of how it all started.
Did you did you at the time think were you doing your business at that time? Were you starting your businesses by then?
Yeah, I had started some businesses. I started doing some direct selling and networking, things like that, and which is kind of a sales position. And what was nice is some of the people, not all of them, but some of the people I was associating with had a little background and they had some influence on me. They had suggested things, and I listened. I mean, I always believed in God. I always believed there was something running things up there.
Right.
But, I mean, when you're in the bar business and, you'd be shocked at what you would pray for and think that that was God's will, that, you can go punch a guy in the melon and, and get away with it. So I've had to learn to pray differently.
Well, I mean, I think we both have over the last, I mean, how long have you been at the church now? It's now Faith Life.
15 years.
15. Okay. So real early on.
Mm-hmm.
So did you walk in the first Sunday there and just go, like, what in the world's this all about?
Oh, yeah. I thought everybody was insane.
Okay.
I really did. I saw people, raising their hands. They were shouting, not shouting over the thing, but they were what you would call worshiping.
Yeah.
Which I'd never, I've been to some major heavy metal concerts, which was similar. I don't think I look back and go, maybe we weren't worshiping the right, ideology there. But what had happened was when Pastor got up and when he spoke, the way he brought the Bible alive, it gave me practical principles, practical things, just from my own business mindset that was thinking, that I realized, okay, that's why that happened. Here's why I can change that result. And when that started to happen, that's kind of how it changed for me.
So it was more a logical thing for you then, wasn't it?
Probably at first.
Yeah.
At first it was just, it made sense. And I'd seen some evidence with him, in his life.
Yeah, he's been successful financially. And I think that appeals to guys a lot. And I know people that try to deny it. They're like, well, if it's financial, it can't be from God. It's like, no, it says the love of money is the root of all evil, not money is the root of all evil. As a matter of fact, I don't know what they do at your church. You're listening this morning, I don't know, but at our church, we take an offering every week because you have to have money to operate the church.
Sure.
And I think people forget that sometimes, that money comes from a different system than God's kingdom, but God uses the money that's from that other system in his kingdom.
Right.
And we miss that. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I mean, I was kind of like you. The first Sunday we came, by this time, you came when they were still at the radio station.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was the manager at that radio station when you all moved out.
Oh.
And so you didn't know that, did you?
I did not.
So I see this group come in every Sunday, and I'm like, wow, who are these people? And kind of, nutso. And I mean, that was my thought. But then I got to know Gary and Drenda, and I was like, well, they're pretty normal. As a matter of fact, I don't know too many guys that are more normal than our pastor, like, hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not into that kind of thing, but he loves it. And so the first Sunday we were in church, they asked us to sit up front, and we were sitting there, and Gary uses Luke 6:38, right? He goes, it says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom, and with the measure you use, so shall it be measured back to you." Did I get that one right?
You did.
Okay, so here's the question. So, who gives to you? And I'm like, God. And I mean, me, I'm answering. He's like, nope. I'm like, well, that's not right. And
put your brain on tilt.
Yeah, it does. And I hadn't allowed that to happen ever. I had just taken what somebody had said and gone with it, but I'd seen evidence in other people's lives, like my wife, for instance, who came from a very poor family. All she knew God for was provision. That's all she knew him for. She wasn't, there are a lot of people that want to preach fire and brimstone at people, and yet it says it is the goodness of God that brings people to repentance. And I think probably over a period of time, that's probably what helped bring you into it, was just knowing how good God was.
Absolutely. What was nice is when I did first show up at that church, I was thinking to myself that there probably should have been a sign on there with my face and a little slash through it, do not admit this guy. And I came with a lot of baggage thinking, man, if they only knew what my background was, how bad I had been in the past, there's no way they would let me in. But pastor, I remember coming out of the bathroom and just meeting him in the hallway on the way out, and he had just introduced himself, said, I'm the pastor, and there was only, 20, 30 people at this church at the time. And, I was really amazed that he didn't have any kind of condemnation for me. I told him I was in the bar business. I actually laid it out there just to see what would happen. And he was like, "Oh, well, that's awesome. Great. Good for you. Da, da, da." And I was like, wow. And then I ended up coming back. It's a funny story real quick. I know I'm a rabbit trail on this one, but I used to, I gave a testimony in front of the church and everybody laughed when I admitted to this. But those little track books that you get, they're little tiny books that you can read up on subjects like the Holy Spirit and what God is and where the devil came from and all that. Well, they used to lay these out at a table in front when you first walked in. I didn't know they were free. So what I would do is I would sit on the table, act like I'm talking to somebody, and I'd slip them in my back pocket thinking I was stealing tracks from this church. Come to find out they were free the entire time. Everybody had a good chuckle when I admitted to that finally, but so it was kind of neat. But what it was is there was enough evidence that got me hungry to want to learn and eat more at that table.
Yeah. And not steal the tracks off the table.
Exactly. Right.
Well, but that's what people don't, I think sometimes, Mike, people don't allow themselves to open up to. I mean, there's certain things that you do want to close yourself off to that are obviously anti-God, but there are some things that God's trying to tell us, and I think that's what kingdom principles are about. And what we wind up getting into with kingdom principles sometimes is it doesn't fit up with the teaching we've had most of our lives about guilt and about God's displeasure with us. It said, "For God so loved the world." It didn't say he was so displeased with the world, but he thought he'd let us have one last chance anyway. It doesn't say that in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It says, God so loved the world that he sent his only son. But what I was taught a lot, and I'm not knocking what I was taught, it was just incomplete. It didn't have that kingdom mindset behind it. And when we come back, I want to talk more about kingdom principles with Mike as well as what he's doing now to make a little money. And it's fascinating, some of the things that he's been into and how God has blessed him and his family. We'll be back with more with Mike Healy after this. Welcome back. Want to re-welcome my friend Mike Healy. Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, are you used to being up this early in the morning on Saturday?
Absolutely.
You ready to go?
I do get up early anymore. I like to get up in the morning and read.
What are you reading these days?
I actually start my morning. Every morning I wake up, go straight to the coffee pot, have a couple cups of coffee, and I read one chapter in the Bible, just kind of whatever, and then I read whatever business book or book on something that I'm, a topic that really kind of resonate with where I'm at in my life.
Now tell me about your business. What kind of business are you in?
You could kind of consider it sales, marketing. I teach people how to earn equity overrides in, energy actually, like commercial and residential gas, electric, things like that.
So in doing this, you're saying that you help people find out where they can save money? Is that basically what you're doing?
Yeah, most people. In fact, I recently, what was funny is I looked this up on Google. I went in there and I typed in, on the search, I said, what are people looking for? Because it's way easier to make money if you're selling something to somebody they already want, right? Wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah.
And I typed in save on insurance, save on mortgages, save on supplements, lose weight. And all of those were roughly anywhere from 50 million hits a month to almost 400 million hits. And I put save on energy, and there was over 1 billion hits on that.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, that's astronomical. And so that is the largest they're saying right now that with deregulation of energy, it's going to be the largest transfer of wealth in the history of our lifetimes.
And is that now you've written a book about that, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. How to Get Rich in Energy Deregulation. It's on Amazon.
Interesting. And I've read part of it. It's fascinating how really in Ohio, for instance, now Ohio is a fairly deregulated state for energy, isn't it?
Yeah, we're across the board, gas and electric.
So you can do residential, commercial, gas and electric. You can save money on that. Roughly, and you may not know the answer to this, but how many businesses are there in this state?
1.3 million minimum. I do know that one. I actually looked it up.
Really? Okay.
Small businesses, over 800,000 collectively, and that probably doesn't include the large businesses or businesses that may not have one central location.
Yeah.
There's over 1 million commercial energy. That's businesses. That doesn't even consider facilities.
Really?
Yeah, that's just something that's labeled as a business, but there may be a building or manufacturing or churches or schools. Those are not necessarily considered businesses.
Wow.
So there's just in the state of Ohio, there's hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on the table.
And you're talking about then going into now, how many people have taken advantage of it though in the state? Do you have any idea?
Well, most people, they would like to take advantage of it. They just don't know how, because a lot of times they're confused at the aspect of it. They don't understand how to shop it out. That's what my business does, is we help locate We help with our relationships, get people the savings that they've been looking for. We do all the work for them, and it's a completely free service.
Oh, wow. And you make money off. How do you make money?
Every time somebody turns the lights on, basically a check comes out. We're actually paid through the suppliers that we refer to these people.
Wow.
They put a margin in there. It's basically a customer. It's a price for customer acquisition.
Interesting. So kind of like advertising price.
Yeah, it's a residual income for generating, energy for people or helping save money on energy.
Now, I know in the past, because I've known you for a little while, you've been involved in several relationship marketing type things. Some people would call it multi-level marketing type things. Now, why does that appeal to you?
It appealed to me just because it was the first time I understood leverage. And that is it's a completely odd concept that most people are not aware of. Most people are trading dollars for hours, right? It's called a linear income. And there's 24 hours in a day. Well, my mind, and I actually thought about this back in the bar business years and years and years ago. I remember we had just a tremendous night one night. Our bar was slammed. I mean, we had a really nice high-end nightclub, all of us, and there was tons of money. And at the end of the night, all the bartenders count out their money. They give it to the manager, and then they put it there. Well, what was crazy is it's 3:00 in the morning. We counting up. Our facility pulled in almost $75,000 in cash that night, and the guy that owned the building, that owned the business, walks in, smiles, says, "Hey, great night, great night." He grabs a beer, and he takes this giant bag of money. And all I'm thinking is, I'm the wrong guy. I want to be that guy. So that was like the first time it ever dawned on me. But what appealed to me with networking wasn't necessarily what I was marketing. It was just the entire concept of the model of leverage, that you could have the ability to override multiple entities. I mean, just think of McDonald's and Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc is most successful or most known for McDonald's, but the reason it's so successful is because there's one on every block. I mean, they don't sell burgers; they sell franchises. It's a big difference.
Well, that's true, because you don't have to be you don't even have to know how to make a hamburger to be a McDonald's franchisee. I wouldn't think.
And I don't have to know how energy's provided either.
Interesting.
There's no difference between poles and pipes.
Interesting. So, well, and I think that the problem that you get into is people. There have been a lot of multi-level type things that have gone around over the years that have been more about recruiting people than it's been about doing a service. I was approached, with a personality like mine. Even if it is a personality like mine, people still want me to be involved because I don't mind talking to people. And then, so we got involved in something early on, right out of high school. I was involved in something, and it seemed like a lot of hype. And my dad didn't like it, and he said, "Hey, you're wasting your time." That typical type of thing. Dad was not. He was a dollars for hours guy, or an hours for dollars guy. He worked all of his life. He drove a Greyhound bus. And I remember when he came home one day and he said, I made $100 today. That was the most he ever made in his life, was $100 a day. And I can't even imagine. I mean, first of all, $100 a day today. I mean, if you think about it, for working days during the year, it's only $22,000 a year, really.
Wow.
It's not much. But that for him was good. Now, obviously, he retired 30 years ago, and it was a more amount of money then than it is now. But that was good for him. Now I think about that, and I know in my own life, being transparent here, in my own life, I've capped myself. I've said, no, this is what I'm worth, and God never did that to me. God never did that to you, and you've never looked at it like that and gone, well, that's all I'm worth is, and then you set the figure. You're the one that determines, I'm worth whatever it is a day. Or did you used to do that? Was that part of your life at one time?
Well, when I first started with the idea, the concept, I bought into the idea of it. I was just looking to pay my car payment. We were way back on the totem, low on the totem pole. I mean, You've heard the stories from, pastor teaching this and on the TV shows we've been on. I mean, we've found items to keep our family household running in garbage dumps. I mean, my wife, I remember she brought home a vacuum cleaner because we desperately needed one. And she found it on the side of the road. And the person that must have thrown it away just never cleaned it. Because all I had to do was change the bag. And I looked at it and it worked. And we had that for nearly 2 years. I mean, it did smell like dog hair and cigarettes when we would vacuum, but it is what it is. And it did the job at the time. So we've advanced, obviously. We've gone a little farther up the ladder.
So what changed your mind?
Well, one of the hardest things people, especially Christians, and let's be bold and direct here, religion Okay, and I'm reading a phenomenal book on this, and he has a phrase in there called genetically altered Christianity. Like if you think of genetically altered food,
Yeah.
the original state of the food is perfect and pure and clean and correct, right? And then you get science in there, or you get people, minds, methodologies in there that change the actual outcome of it. It still looks similar to what a piece of ear of corn is, but it's not even close, right? It doesn't even replicate itself. If you planted one of these, kernels off of a normal corn cob these days, it would not grow because it's been genetically altered. The same thing happens in Christianity, especially when people are talking about finances and money. Most of the time, people have been targeted as being greedy, greedy or self-serving or prideful and stuff if they're wealthy. Well, what I've noticed and the evidence that I have personally seen, along with what I've been able to do, is money is not good or bad. It's just stuff. If you're an idiot, I always say this, and my wife drives me wife nuts that I'm so blunt with this, but if you're an idiot without money and you get a lot of money, you're going to be a bigger idiot. You're going to hurt a lot of people.
Yeah.
If you're a nice person and you've got a heart to give, take a wild guess what you probably are capable of doing if you have double the income, or if you have an excess $100,000 a year coming in. You're now able to build churches. You're now able to build schools. But what it is if you think about it, the devil himself has taught that lie, because he doesn't want the Christians to have the money. Because if the Christians figured out that it was their dominion, if they have to take their dominion back and their authority, and they had the finances to do it, everything will change.
And that's what you've seen in your life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So the kingdom principle here is that money's not bad.
No, absolutely. Money's just stuff. It's just like a hammer's not bad. I can build a house with it or hurt somebody with it.
Yeah, I wonder, I guess it's because money really lies close to our heart. I mean, that's what most people, now we'll say it doesn't, but that's what defines most people is, am I wealthy? Am I not wealthy? Am I poor?
It's an identity crisis. It's not even a financial issue a lot of times. It's people a lot of times have to find wealth has always been something that gives you identity. Like if you look at, and I'm not going to put down any athletes because there's a lot of great star athletes, sports figures that are, Christian or run their households correctly.
Yeah.
And they have lots and lots of money and they're doing great things. But then you've got the same ones that, that they don't have any root. They don't understand what it is. And their whole identity is tied around finances and how much bling they can have. Okay, well, if you could take that same person with that kind of income and go, hey, listen, if your identity is tied to Christ, that you don't have, that we're not just showing it off here, that there's a purpose. See, the thing is, a lot of times people think they will be destroyed by the wealth because they don't have a purpose for their prosperity. Big difference. If you just make money and you don't know what to do with it, it can be good or bad to you. But if there's purpose for your prosperity, good or bad, that will give you a better outcome, obviously.
And that's true, because you think about food as a purpose. Let's get off money for a moment and just talk about food. Some people eat because they're afraid there won't be any more.
Mm-hmm.
You're afraid you're going to run out of something, and that may sound silly, but I've lived that myself. Be like, oh, I better eat something because I'll be hungry in the morning. Well, are you hungry now? No, not really, but I better eat something. No, there's no purpose for that.
And that comes down to why people don't give. That's why people don't tithe. Because they don't have a full trust in the provision of God the Father, because most of us, a lot of people have been raised with, in households that everything was a lack and scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
So it's just passed on from generation to generation to generation. It's literally living under a curse. Whereas if you understood the abundance of what God had in the kingdom for you, versus there's no scarcity. I mean, if somebody actually takes the time and looks at the scriptures that talk about abundance, it says, I mean, most people probably have the Psalm 23 plastered on their, they've got it on a plaque. It sits in front of their house and everybody can see that they're such a spiritual person because they've got Psalm 23 on their wall, right? But if you read through that and you look at it, those are promises. And in fact, one of them says, my cup runneth over, right?
Right.
But right after that it says, I prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. Now, let me ask you something. Most people are thinking that that's all in the by and by and we're floating around on clouds in heaven, right? The problem is are there going to be enemies in heaven?
Oh, no.
Of course not. So that means that the enemies, who are your enemies? Your enemies aren't people. It says we do not war against people, but against powers and principalities, spiritual realms, right?
Right.
So what happens is God is showing off. If you really understood sonship, which is what a lot of people don't have, and I know we're kind of a little, but if people understood sonship and how much God really wants to bless you, you would have less of a hindrance of receiving, because it's not based on how worthy you are, but it's based on how worthy Jesus was, which now gives you full rights and receivability of the same promises that Jesus had. And that's why it says, your cup runneth over. Most people are picturing the glass half empty or even full. But most people don't look at the pitcher that God's pouring, an unlimited 200 trillion billion gallon pitcher pouring into your little shot cup.
Yeah.
Your little Dixie cup is all you want, because you don't want to look pious. You don't want people to think, oh my gosh, I've got money. But guess what? If God can show you that, then you're not focused on money as the idol. You're actually focusing on God, and you understand that money is a tool that he's going to help to use through you to bless other people.
So that gives me two other things that go along with what's going on in our country right now. We're really teaching at a very high level now, maybe the highest level in this country, that poverty's great and that wealth is bad. We're really teaching that at a politically high level at this point. We're saying that, if you're poor, we're going to take care of you. If you're wealthy, you're greedy and you're no good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've basically turned the entire, when the United States was originally founded, it was all entrepreneurs running around. Let's take the land, let's go out there, let's make a life for ourselves. Yeah, people are going to run into issues. You're going to have setbacks and so on. But what happens is when you can control the wealth of people, which is obviously what the devil's doing.
Right.
It's not necessarily just the government. It's
right.
Spiritual principalities that are trying to come against those mindsets, those teachings, that's just control. The thing is again, if you really understand the Bible and the principles in it, there is an exchange of kingdom principles. Even though the things around you, if you look at it, if somebody is aligned with God, those things, God can still protect you in the midst of the storm, regardless of what's going on around you. And there are instances. See, I personally still believe there's going to be a very, you hear you've heard all the Christian people talk about this large transfer of wealth, that it's going to happen to the Christians and so on. It's already happened. I mean, it really already has happened because of Jesus himself. But we have to help, kind of bring that into manifestation in the natural through business ideas, through standing up for righteousness, through prayer, through tithing, through giving God legal access to act on our behalf.
Talk about that a little bit. How do we give him legal access?
Well, first off, you got to identify the one thing that, before we even get into that,
okay,
is that I think the one thing that people have the hardest problem with is why they give, how they can receive, and really acting on faith is a love issue. And that's probably for another complete different radio talk here, but a love issue. Because if you always thought that your dad was mad at you, that he was never going to give you anything unless you performed, you can never receive, because it's always performance-based. True sonship is, hey, step up to the table because I've got plenty. Here's the biscuits, right? But back to what you would ask me is, with the kingdom principles, basically there are some specific guidelines in there that talk about tithing. Tithing is basically 10%. And if you think about it, the rate has not gone up since it's ever been implemented. It's 10 cents out of $1, right? It's not that God needs the 10 cents. It's not that the church needs the 10 cents, because God will always find somebody who's willing to obey, to do what he's asked or what he's trying to get across, in the world. Right. But the problem is that if it's a promise, but it's a direction. Okay. And this is a hard issue, because if I decide that I'm going to tithe out of religious duty, then I don't have any faith involved in sowing in that seed. But what the promise is, and this is in Malachi, I believe it's the end of chapters of Malachi, of the last book in the Old Testament, where he said, well, how have you robbed me? God says, he talks to these people are under curse, they're complaining, and and he says, well, your whole nation, your whole group of people's under a curse. And they cry out, well, how have we robbed you, God? Why are we cursed? He said, you've robbed me in tithes and offerings. And what he was doing wasn't robbing them for money. He was robbing them of the ability for him to legally bless it. I mean, if you actually follow what happened from Adam and Eve's fall, where Adam gave over dominion to Satan, and then Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness right out of the gates. Satan says, bow down, worship me, because I have been given all of the wealth and splendor of the kingdoms, all its money. Who gave it to him? Adam did, back in the thing. But so people don't want to admit that.
They're afraid of. I think people are afraid of money.
Yeah, they're afraid of it, and a lot of times too. Here's something that I never forgot, and I've realized this: money will amplify a person's character.
Yeah, you said that a while ago.
Yeah,
You know, if
it
you're
will
a jerk, you're
amplify
a
a
jerk.
person's character.
So this has gone in a different direction than I expected it to, which is good. I mean, that's not a problem. But I think that I asked, I think it was Gary Cassee one time, what's poverty? And he said, well, everybody thinks poverty is being poor. And he said, it is not being poor. It is a fear of lack. You're afraid you're going to lack something.
Mm-hmm.
And now that lack can be spirituality. You're afraid that you're not going to have Jesus in your life if you get wealthy, or you're afraid of, I know a lot of people that are very wealthy that are afraid to spend anything because, well, they may not get any more. Well, wait a minute. That's where did it come from in the first place? I asked a pastor one time what his vision for his church was. And this has been years ago. And he said, well, my vision is to protect those that got me here. Well, wait a minute. That's not even, those people didn't get you here. God got you here. You followed particular principles. God got you here. Now you're going to protect people? That means automatically now you're in a defensive position.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people get defensive about where they are, and I think that happens with money too. I've had trouble with it because I've been like, well, I'm not worthy of it. You mentioned that a few minutes ago. That's begun to go away, but I can tell in actions that I've had in my own life that it's like, I was thinking the other day, and you and I were talking about something a while back. I don't even think you'll remember this, but I was thinking the other day, I need to replace my income so I have more flexibility. And I was praying about that, and God's like, okay, remember something Mike said to you the other day. Why do you just want to replace your income? It's kind of like you said a while ago, you just wanted a car payment when you first started out. Now, you don't even have a car payment now probably. So, or if you do, it's like, I don't care, whatever, that type of thing. Am I right?
I paid cash for the last vehicle I have, yes.
See, now that's nothing wrong with that.
No.
At all. And I think that in my mindset, mine is like, okay, this is what I make now. If I can replace that, I'll be all right. And God's like, yeah, you'll be all right, but there's not abundance in that. There's provision in that, but he wants to go beyond provision. He wants to go to abundance because that's where the hospitals get built. That's where the mission work gets done. That's where people see the goodness of God that brings people to repentance. It's not how many people can you have standing on the street corner buttonholing people all the time saying, hey, you need to know Jesus or I'm going to take you to meet him right now. That type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we close out today, I want to let you talk a little bit about your family because I think if I know you very much, that all this is just kind of background stuff about family, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, everything, my whole life is basically revolves around my family. Okay, it's God first, family, then business and and fun and things like that.
Sure.
I've got 3 awesome kids. I've got my littlest is Zeke, who's 10. I've got Isaiah, who's 13, and then Alexis, who is now almost 16 years old. I feel like I'm shrinking in my house because my wife, Stacy, as you know, is tall, and they're all outgrowing me. So sometimes I look like Gimli in Lord of the Rings next to Gandalf. But
This shall not pass.
Yes. So but it's awesome. We actually homeschool our kids. And I'll tell you what, that's what's really been a blessing with having our own business or being an entrepreneur. Is even through the ups and the downs, my family's always been there. We always see each other. I mean, I'm with my wife all the time. And I actually enjoy my wife, which is nice. That helps out a lot. That, it's not like some people go, well, I've said that to people and it's turned them off. Well, I don't want him home all the time. I'm like, really? Oh my gosh, you got other issues. We got to figure.
I feel your pain.
Yeah,
I mean, I love being home too.
Yeah. So it's been awesome. My family's great. And, with the principles we've collectively put together and we've watched them, we've used them. Found that the Word of God works every time. God's Word cannot fail. That's why I'm where I'm at. I mean, people always think I come up with these great ideas, and I'm really not this smart.
Well, no, that's one of the things. God gives you ideas. I mean, He knows things. The Holy Spirit is there to instruct us and to comfort us and to bring us along. And if we'll listen, but so many people just are like, well, I heard a guy say one time, he was praying and while he was praying, he would come up with business ideas. He stopped me and goes, Lord, I'm asking for help here, and I keep thinking of these business ideas. And he's like, well, yeah.
Can I give you a couple quick stories?
Sure.
Because I know we're running a
Oh,
long time.
we're good.
Okay.
I can always edit.
Got it. Perfect. I'll give you a perfect example of what you just said. This will give a perfect reference and testimony at the same time. When I first began to make the decision that I was going to start tithing, and you know what, the Bible was either going to be true or not. And that, what I'd mentioned earlier about the tithe, that God says, and that's the only verse in the Bible, God gives you permission to test him, to show his faithfulness.
Yeah.
It says he'll open the windows in heaven, pour out such blessing, won't have room enough to contain it. So I began, my wife and I, we came into agreement that we were going to start tithing. And I did notice immediately that everything actually started to work out. Even when times seemed to be tough, like you would think that, oh my gosh, rent's due tomorrow, I don't have enough money for rent. But it was a matter of some of those times where it was like you could pay rent or you could pay your tithe. And I said, look, I'm going to stand on the word, and we paid our tithe. And miraculously, like Stacy would pick up a shift when she was still in the restaurant industry, or I would have a business, some sale would come in just unexpectedly,
Yeah.
and I had everything covered. But then when I started to go above the tithe and do offerings as well, a little bit extra, and for specific needs, I also saw increase. Can I share some of the stories with you?
Sure,
Some of the things that we've had happen. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the biggest things that got my attention, the biggest one that said, oh my gosh, look at what I tapped into, was the time that Stacy and I decided to get into shape. We were both, we were kind of, in our, we were in our 30s, and, she had just had our third child, Zeke, and she was, overweight, for her.
Yeah.
And we decided to do a before and after contest, one of those before and after contests. Well, during that period, I was volunteering to work at the church, and I would greet people out in the park cars. What I did out in the parking. Remember when the old church was a gravel parking lot and everything? So I'd park the cars, and I felt really. I wasn't even doing it out duty. I was just excited to be at the church because I was really seeing change in my life. And what had happened is I gave away a van. There was a family came, looked like they needed a new van, and mine, I sold one, or I bought a new one, and I had this one, and I was going to sell it and probably make a few $1,000s on it. It wasn't like it was a brand new or anything, but I just felt like deep in my heart that I should give this van. I told Stacy, and I gave it. Well, we could have definitely used the money for that van coming in, but what was amazing, check this out, is shortly thereafter, we both got into this contest. We did a before and after. It was a 12-week thing. The grand prize winner is Stacy. My wife ends up winning the grand prize 6 months later of that, after they brought in all the entries, and she wins a 2003 brand new 50th anniversary limited edition Corvette, free and clear. No, that's it, right? So we're hooting and hollering because we win this thing, right? On the way out, we both look at each other, and I start crying because I said, Stacy, do you realize this car represents good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over from what we sowed? And that was the biggest thing, because I always believe, hey, if you're going to sow big, you're going to reap big, right?
Yeah.
And we did, and we watched that happen. And then that's just the tip of the iceberg of some of the things we've had happen. But that was just one of the most amazing things.
That just woke you up, didn't it?
Absolutely woke me up.
That's great. The name of your book again? The one that I know about. I hear you've got others coming out.
I have 3 published right now. I've probably got 2 or 3 more coming out. The first book I put out was How to Get Rich in Energy Deregulation by Mike Healy, and Stacy Healy.
And we can find that on Amazon.
You can go right on Amazon and type in that.
And what about your website? You have a website?
Basically the easiest one to just find out a little bit about me and actually hear some of these stories, because I got stories about where I gave away, I sold a house, I gave away, the cars and things like that, is whoismikehealy.com, whoismikehealy.com, Healy.
Can I just, closing out here, I want to tell you something that I look at you and I don't think, like you probably think, oh, if Healy can do it, anybody can do it. I look at you and go, you've overcome some things in your life that I haven't had to overcome to get to where you are today. And I look at my wife and see the things that she's overcome, and I think the hardest thing to overcome isn't the physical stuff. It's the stuff that's in the 6 inches between your ears, because your mind is, the old phrase, it's a terrible thing to waste. The enemy plays in your mind all the time. He's just, wandering around there. And I really like the verse that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your steps. And one of the keys to that is the steps part. You've got to take steps. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't take steps. I'm sure you've seen that in your life.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate you being here with me today.
Terry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We thank you, Mike.